God ignored his prayers for 20 years, so today he's using his own bare hands to beat the literal hell out of every demon in Seoul. And it all started the night his father never came home. Years ago in South Korea, a young boy named Young-hoo lives with his father, Sergeant Park, after losing his mother too soon. Life is hard, but Park raises his son alone with quiet resolve. Every night before his highway patrol duty, he leaves Young-hoo in his grandmother's care, promising to return. One day on patrol, Park stops a suspicious car and asks the driver to lower the window. Inside, two young passengers sit eerily still, their vacant stares suggesting hypnosis. When Park orders the driver to step out for a breathalyzer test, the young man, wearing a strange crow-shaped ring, suddenly floors the accelerator. Park grabs the car door, trying to stop him, but the driver violently attacks, throwing the sergeant onto the road and leaving him critically injured. Rushed to the hospital, Park's condition worsens, and doctors warn he may not survive. Terrified of losing his father like he lost his mother, Young-hoo runs to a church and prays desperately for his life. A young priest notices the grieving boy, prays with him, and reassures him that true faith can make anything possible. Young-hoo clings to those words. Later, waiting at home with his grandmother, exhaustion overtakes him and he falls asleep. In his dream, Sergeant Park appears calm and gentle, telling his son to behave well and always help others. As they share a final goodbye, Park holds Young-hoo's right hand and a radiant energy begins to glow. Young-hoo suddenly wakes in the night, only to learn that his father has died from his injuries. The next morning, a funeral is held for Sergeant Park. The young priest who once prayed with Young-hoo comes to offer condolences, but instead of comfort, Young-hoo feels betrayed. Overwhelmed by grief and rage, he throws a crucifix at the priest and shouts that God never answered his prayers. From that moment on, Young-hoo turns his back on faith. Years later, Young-hoo has transformed his pain into strength. He is now a professional MMA fighter and the undefeated middleweight champion. Traveling to the United States, he prepares to defend his title against American challenger John White. As soon as the fight begins, John launches a powerful kick, but Young-hoo dodges and counters with a single crushing punch, knocking him out instantly. However, consumed by rage, Young-hoo continues attacking his unconscious opponent. The referee rushes in just in time, pulling him away and saving John's life. Despite the outburst, Young-hoo secures another victory. On the flight back to Seoul, Young-hoo falls asleep and dreams of his late father. This time, they stand inside a mausoleum. Sergeant Park leads him down a long corridor to an altar holding a crucifix. Still resentful toward God, Young-hoo tries to throw it away, but it sticks to his hand. Suddenly, flames erupt, searing his arm with unbearable pain. Young-hoo jolts awake on the plane to find his hand bleeding. The injury from his dream is real. He hurriedly bandages it and returns home, hoping the pain will fade. That night, a terrifying shadowy presence emerges and begins tormenting him. Young-hoo is completely paralyzed, unable to move or open his eyes. But when the entity notices the wound on his hand, it suddenly retreats. Young-hoo snaps awake in terror, his hand bleeding once again, and rushes to the hospital. After multiple tests, doctors find nothing wrong and advise him to seek other explanations. Confused, Young-hoo leaves until his driver recalls something disturbing. His niece, Hong-jin, once suffered something similar. At 15, she stopped sleeping, blood flowed from her eyes, and she eventually lost her sight. Desperate, her mother took her to a shaman who sensed a powerful supernatural force within the girl and trained her to control it. Though Hong-jin never regained her vision, she gained the ability to see the supernatural and now uses her powers to help others. Though skeptical, Young-hoo agrees to meet her. She lives in a remote sanctuary. When he shows her the wound on his hand, Hong-jin uses her supernatural sight and sees a radiant energy flowing from it. She tells him the answers he seeks lie in a church across Seoul. Young-hoo heads there immediately, but as he reaches the entrance, a flock of crows blocks his path, cawing ominously. Uneasy, he circles around to the back and walks straight into chaos. Inside, two priests, Fathers An and Choi, are performing an exorcism on a possessed young man. Suddenly, the man breaks free and lunges at Father An. Father Choi pulls him back, but the possessed man attacks again, spewing black, foul slime from his mouth. Horrified, Father Choi flees. The possessed man turns to kill Father An, but Young-hoo steps in. He throws the man aside and pins him down. When Young-hoo presses his wounded hand against him, a white flame erupts, burning the possessed man's head. Witnessing this miracle, Father An pours holy water onto him, causing the flame to blaze even brighter and scorch the evil spirit within. Thanks to the ritual, the young man is finally freed from possession. Watching closely, Young-hoo realizes the white flame came directly from the wound on his hand. After examining it, Father An explains that the mark is a stigmata, a wound like those suffered by Jesus Christ during the crucifixion, granting extraordinary abilities, including healing and the power to drive out evil spirits. Though Young-hoo refuses to believe it, he still invites Father An to his apartment, desperate for answers. Inside, the priest performs a protective prayer over the home. While walking through Young-hoo's room, he notices a photo of Young-hoo with his father. It is then revealed that Father An is the same young priest who prayed beside Young-hoo years ago before Sergeant Park died. Choosing not to reopen old wounds, Father An keeps this to himself. Before leaving, he gives Young-hoo a cross necklace for protection. Back at his own home, Father An contacts the Vatican, reporting evidence of a Bishop of Darkness operating in Seoul, a servant of evil spirits who selects victims and orchestrates possessions. Unbeknownst to him, this Bishop of Darkness is Ji Shin, the owner of a nightclub called Babylon, and the man responsible for Sergeant Park's death. That night, Ji Shin enters a hidden chamber beneath his club, where a secret altar is dedicated to the sacred serpent. In exchange for immortality and eternal youth, he offers the souls of his victims, manipulating events from the shadows. Meanwhile, Father An visits the archdiocese to find an assistant, but no priest is willing to perform exorcisms. Though experienced, he knows he cannot face the Bishop of Darkness alone. With no options left, he returns home, only to find Young-hoo waiting outside. Using help from a church secretary, Young-hoo tracked him down and explains that despite the protection ritual, he still cannot sleep, and the stigmata on his hand is worsening. Father An gives him a rosary blessed by the Pope, saying it will help protect him and reminds him that faith is the only true weapon against evil. Young-hoo admits he lost his faith after his father's death. Father An then shares his own past, how he also lost faith when his mentor died after teaching him everything about exorcism. Over time, he realized God's intentions are not always clear and that answers often come later. Since then, he has devoted his life to helping others, though he admits he is growing weary. Moved by his honesty, Young-hoo offers him a ride. During the drive, Young-hoo recalls how close Father An came to dying during the exorcism and warns him that working alone is dangerous, offering his help. Father An refuses, unwilling to involve Young-hoo in such peril. Eventually, Father An asks to stop at an apartment building where another possession has been reported. As he steps out, he thanks Young-hoo for the ride. In that moment, Young-hoo suddenly sees the image of his father reflected through the priest, leaving him frozen in place. Fearing something terrible may happen to Father An, Young-hoo decides he cannot stay away. He covers the stigmata on his hand with a glove and follows him. Realizing Young-hoo won't back down, the priest reluctantly accepts his help. Together, they visit a young mother whose face is badly injured. Shaking with fear, she points upstairs and says her daughter, Soo-jin, is possessed. Before entering Soo-jin's room, Father An seals the door by drawing a cross with a pencil carved from a sacred olive tree, preventing the spirit from escaping. Inside, Soo-jin appears completely normal and calmly asks why they are there. When Father An raises his crucifix, nothing happens. Soo-jin even grabs it herself, unaffected. She claims her mother suffers from severe depression and insists the injuries were self-inflicted. Father An presses another cross to her face, still no reaction. Despite this, he remains uneasy. Calling Young-hoo outside, Father An explains that evil spirits can hide deep within a person. To confirm his suspicion, he suddenly rushes back inside and, with Young-hoo's help, forces holy water down Soo-jin's throat. Instantly, she begins vomiting blood as a grotesque entity reveals itself. The creature slams Father An into the wall. Young-hoo tries to restrain Soo-jin, but she levitates and violently hurls him into the ceiling. Her eyes glow red as the entity reveals the truth. It was responsible for his father's death. Enraged, Young-hoo throws her onto the bed and begins attacking. Father An desperately pulls him away as the spirit mocks him, urging him to surrender to his anger. Fighting for control, Young-hoo steadies himself, removes his glove, and presses his stigmata-marked hand to her face. White flames erupt. Father An pours holy water, intensifying the fire until the evil spirit is completely expelled. Afterward, Father An asks Sujin if she met anyone unusual, suspecting the Bishop of Darkness placed the spirit inside her. Before she can answer, she suddenly cries tears of blood and clutches her throat in agony. Elsewhere, Ji-shin performs a ritual at the altar of the sacred serpent, using a voodoo doll to attack Sujin remotely. Father An prays fervently, and his faith overwhelms the dark magic. Ji-shin's ring burns, and the voodoo doll is consumed by white flames, breaking his control. With the danger over, Father An allows Sujin to rest and returns home with Young-hoo. Later that night, they share a quiet meal. Asked why he chose to help, Young-hoo explains that his father appears in his dreams, urging him to help others. Even without faith, Young-hoo feels bound to honor his father's wish. Meanwhile, Ji-shin sacrifices a crow and asks the sacred serpent to alter his appearance. Disguised as Father Choi, he goes to a Catholic orphanage and finds a boy named Hosok being bullied. Offering strength and protection, he gains the boy's trust and performs a ritual, forcing multiple evil spirits into Hosok's body. Later, Ji-shin visits Father An's apartment and, still disguised, warns Young-hoo that Father An is an evil entity. Young-hoo dismisses the claim, but doubt takes root. The next morning, Father An receives an urgent call from the orphanage about a possession and calls Young-hoo for help. Shaken by the warning, Young-hoo doesn't answer. Soon after, his manager offers him a lucrative fight in the United States. At the orphanage, Father An finds Hosok fully possessed, with 4 nuns praying nearby. He restrains the boy and begins the exorcism. At first, it works, until the door slams shut. Hosok rises and releases a piercing scream, overwhelming everyone. One nun collapses, blood pouring from her ears. Elsewhere, Young-hoo senses something is wrong. Trusting his instincts, he rejects the fight offer and calls Father An back. A nun answers and explains the situation. Realizing the danger, Young-hoo races to the orphanage. By the time he arrives, Father An is exhausted and being brutally beaten by Hosok. Desperate to save him, one of the nuns grabs the crucifix and steps forward, attempting the exorcism before it's too late. The nun desperately tries to defend herself, but the possessed Hosok overpowers her and grabs her by the neck. Just as all hope seems lost, Young-hoo arrives and hurls the boy away. With no other option, Young-hoo uses the stigmata again, pressing his wounded hand to Hosok's face. White flames ignite, and when he pours Father An's holy water over him, the evil spirits burn away. Hosok is finally freed, saving both Father An and the nun. Afterward, Hosok recalls only one thing: a man dressed as a priest approached him. Father An immediately realizes this must be the Bishop of Darkness. Leaving the boy to rest, he and Young-hoo step outside, where the orphanage children rush forward and hug Young-hoo in gratitude. Moved, Young-hoo realizes he is finally honoring his father's wish to help others. On the way back, Young-hoo apologizes for ignoring Father An's call. The priest smiles, saying he's glad to see Young-hoo becoming an emissary of God. Though Young-hoo still struggles to believe, Father An is convinced he was chosen to fight the darkness. But Ji-shin remains free. Returning to the altar of the sacred serpent, he performs another ritual, possessing a guard dog and setting it loose. That night, Hosok hears a voice calling him into the hallway. The possessed dog attacks and kills him. Ji-shin offers the boy's soul to the serpent and is rewarded with a poisoned fang. Soon after, Father An receives news of the tragedy. He and Young-hoo rush to the morgue, where Hosok's body bears bite marks on his neck. While Father An prays, Young-hoo notices a suspicious man and gives chase. Moments later, the body bag begins to move. When Father An opens it, Hosok appears alive, begging for help. Overcome with guilt, the priest embraces him, only for Ji-shin to reveal himself and stab Father An with the poisoned fangs. Young-hoo rushes back to find the priest captive. Ji-shin offers to spare him if Young-hoo surrenders the stigmata. Young-hoo agrees, but Father An refuses the sacrifice and stabs himself instead. As the poison spreads, Yong-hoo carries him to Father Choi's house, where Choi prays desperately to break the curse. Once again, facing the loss of someone he loves, Yong-hoo kneels before the crucifix and begs God to save Father An, but nothing happens. Feeling abandoned, Yong-hoo decides to confront the bishop alone. Before leaving, Father Choi gives him a cassock blessed by the Vatican to protect him from darkness. Wearing it beneath his clothes, Yong-hoo goes to Soo-jin, who gives him Ji-shin's location, the Babylon nightclub. Yong-hoo heads there immediately. At the entrance, Ji-shin's possessed guards attack. Yong-hoo fights fiercely, but is quickly overwhelmed. Changing tactics, he exposes the cassock, soaks his stigmata with holy water, and charges back in. One by one, his blows ignite white flames, purging the evil spirits. Soon only Ji-shin remains. Deep within his lair, Ji-shin begs the sacred serpent for power. The entity demands a final sacrifice, his own heart. Ji-shin obeys, plunging into the well and emerging as a monstrous human-serpent hybrid. The creature attacks, but Yong-hoo's flames fail. Ji-shin slams him into a wall and bites his shoulder, knocking him unconscious. Yong-hoo awakens in a vast white space where his father's spirit appears. Yong-hoo begs to stay, but Sergeant Park tells him his mission isn't finished. Holding his son's hand, he sends him back, awakening even greater power in the stigmata. Back in reality, Yong-hoo's hand erupts with blinding white fire. He confronts Ji-shin again, and this time they clash evenly. Ji-shin strikes with claws, but Yong-hoo counters with flaming fists. Summoning all his strength, Yong-hoo delivers a final devastating punch, slamming Ji-shin to the ground. With the bishop defeated, Yong-hoo melts the poisoned fangs, saving Father An's life. As he prepares to leave, the sacred serpent appears, not to attack, but to drag Ji-shin's body into the well as punishment. Later, Yong-hoo returns to Father Choi's house and finds Father An fully healed. Days later, Father Choi receives a letter. Father An is now in the Vatican, accompanied by Yong-hoo, who has agreed to train as an exorcist. Along with the letter, An leaves behind his cross, knowing evil will rise again.